I kind of have this mindset that if you make a change through science or technology, it's irreversible. Like if you invent an airplane, humans will always fly. Or if you invent a vaccine, someone somewhere will always be better off for it. As opposed to if you do some kind of socio-political change, the next terrible person can come along and completely ruin what you had done. So I kind of like the irreversibility of progress through science and technology, because once you do it, from then on, everyone will be better off. No one can really take it away.
This is the Nucleate Podcast, the voice of the next generation of biotech leaders.
Hi, and welcome to Nucleate Podcast. My name is Anastasia, and I'll be your host today. In this episode, we talk about courage, resilience, and what it means to keep going when the odds turn against you. Our guest, Armon Sharei, has seen it all. He first founded Squeeze Biotechnology straight out of his PhD at MIT, building a novel intracellular delivery platform that landed a $500 million partnership with Roche, went public, and advanced to the clinic, before ultimately facing liquidation in 2023. Rather than walking away, Armon came back with Portal Biotechnologies, a company built to deliver what the field still needed: scalable, high-throughput intracellular delivery for RNA, gene editing, and cell therapy. Today, Portal is backed by leading investors like PwC and already has over 50 industry and academic partners. Armon's story isn't just about science, it's about grit, vision, and rebuilding after setbacks. We hope you enjoy it. Thanks for joining the Nucleate Podcast, Armon.
Of course. Thanks a lot for having me.
So we are very excited to explore your journey. It's a very interesting one with a lot of bumpy roads in between. So therefore, I think our listeners will be having a lot of lessons on strategy, on failure, how to deal with this, and basically how to start over. But before we dive into it, let's go back to the beginnings. Can you tell us a little bit where you grew up? And how did your environment shape you? So not just in terms of education, but lessons about risk-taking, resilience, and also the mindsets toward failure and success, which we'll be diving into throughout our episode together.
Sure. So early life, I was born in California in the Bay Area. When I was 5, we moved back to Iran. So my parents are Iranian, and they did the opposite of what everybody else does. So they lived here, had their kids here, and then decided to go back. So I grew up in Iran until I was 13, and then we moved to Dubai for my first years of high school. I was there for 3 years, and then came back to the US to finish my last year of high school, and then went to Stanford for undergrad in chemical engineering. And then went to MIT for my PhD in chemistry. But kind of to the early life questions on maybe lessons and stuff, I think my kind of overarching motivation is very much the cliche, make the world a better place. Because I think growing up in a third world country, but seeing what the first world was like, because I was born here / we would come over the summers, gave a lot of motivation to, try to help things be better for people in the world that were born into situations that were just less lucky than others. Because I think we forget that, a lot of things in life that turn out are just the luck of where you were born in a way, or who you were born to. So I kind of ended up with this deep sense of we got to do something to make it better for everyone else. So that was generally my main driver. And I'm like, as long as you try, it doesn't matter what happens in the end. The important thing was you tried. So I think that's where my kind of, calculation for the risk-taking stuff comes from. It's like, well, if I try to do this, is it a good chance it could make the world better? Or will I regret never having taken that chance? And I'm like, if the answer is yes, you should do it, then we'll go for it and we'll figure out the problems if they come up.
That's amazing. And did you always know that you want to go into science, or in the beginning, did you have any other ideas?
I was mostly nerdy growing up, so I always liked science and math. So I think I was predisposed towards that. But otherwise, to me, it was a means to an end. Like, I feel like science stuff and technology stuff can really help. And I think the thing that convinced me to especially go to grad school and commit a lot to this path was I kind of have this mindset that if you make a change through science or technology, it's irreversible. Like, if you invent an airplane, humans will always fly. Or if you invent a vaccine, someone somewhere will always be better off for it. As opposed to if you do some kind of socio-political change, the next terrible person can come along and completely ruin what you had done. So I kind of like the irreversibility of progress through science and technology, because once you do it, from then on, everyone will be better off. No one can really take it away. So I think that's what kind of cemented my commitment to go to that side, because I prefer the irreversibility of it.
And what was the first big idea, or were there any big ideas? Because when I started my medical school and research, I always said I want to cure glioblastoma because I wanted to aim for the deadliest cancer there is out, which changed throughout my research and throughout the years. So did you have something big like this in mind?
Uh, Not necessarily early on. I would say when I was in undergrad, I was initially drawn towards aerospace because I thought the idea of space travel and more efficient air travel within planet Earth could be very interesting. What very quickly turned me off from it is that most of the cutting edge stuff was military, and I definitely didn't want to do military. So that quickly wrote off that concept. But going into grad school, when I still wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, the project that really attracted me, which I ended up working on, was this project to deliver materials into cells. But what was intriguing to me is that cells are little machines. They can do all kinds of things in our body. They run the show. And if you could leverage these machines as therapeutics, they could do so much more than any small molecule or biologic could ever do. And therefore, that was really attractive to me because engineering these machines was difficult. But if you could solve that, now you can unlock a whole world of potential. So that conceptual element of can you leverage cells as therapeutics instead of small molecules and biologics, I think is what really grabbed me back in whatever it was, 2008 or something, when I was starting as a grad student, and I've been stuck with it ever since.
And a lot of guests that we interview, they always say like there is this motive of scientist versus entrepreneur, and that they're, kind of two different mindsets. And basically the scientists speak another language and also has another mindset, versus the entrepreneur who may be asking himself another questions and thinking about other applications of this science or like of these discoveries. So when in your career was it a decision that you would want to become an entrepreneur? Was it more a gradual development into the role? Curious about that.
It was a bit of I think it was a bit of an evolution into it. So my main motive was always the kind of make a big impact. And so to me, everything else was a means to an end. On the science front, I wasn't the type of scientist that just liked answering the next question for the hell of it. Like just looking at a cell, I wasn't necessarily that curious why certain things would work the way they did. I was like, is it useful to engineer that? Sure, let's go do something about it. If it's not, I'm like, I don't really care what the name of that pathway is. So to me, when it came to kind of having an impact, obviously being a grad student and going through these things, the way to get to that end of an impact was, okay, we need to solve these problems to make cell engineering feasible. And then once it got to a stage where, okay, we have a new way of doing this, how do we maximize its impact? Initially, I thought it was trivial for it to get out in the world and people to do it. I thought, if you just publish a paper, obviously people will start doing this. And so we've already done the hard part. Let's go kind of do something else. But then I was realizing, oh, it's not that simple. You need to do something about it and help get it out there, which is what tilted me more and more towards the kind of entrepreneurship and company side, which is if we really want this to get out there and make an impact, you got to kind of jump out of the academic bubble and try to make things happen in the much kind of rougher real world context. So that's what drove me to go to the company forming side, because I actually, even when we started my old company, Squeeze, back in 2013, I technically did not join it full time when we started. I went and did a postdoc because I still wanted to stay on the academic side. But then throughout that experience, I got convinced I had to jump to the other side. And so I switched.
And this brings us to your first company. which was basically it was based or like founded on your PhD research that you did at MIT, where you developed the squeeze platform. So can you tell us a little bit about this discovery, your work, and also your thoughts when you decided that it's the time for me to take it out and spin out the company out of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So the project that had really grabbed my attention when I was, just starting as a PhD student at MIT was this project where Klaus Jensen's lab was working on this concept of a gun to shoot materials into cells. So it was basically the way that thing worked is you had a channel, you had cells going through it, and then it was a very American solution to a problem of shooting it. So we were trying to fire things into the cells, and that seemed cool. And I was already getting enamored by the concept of engineering cells, and delivering materials into cells seemed to be a critical bottleneck. So that's the project I joined. Throughout trying to get it to work, because like most PhD projects, you think it's supposed to work when you join the program, but then you realize it doesn't work and you got to do it. We accidentally figured out that if you just squish cells at high speeds, you can disrupt their membrane and temporarily the cell will be open. So anything that's outside will diffuse in and then the cell will seal back up. So it was a unexpected but very simple way to put whatever you want into a cell. And once we had kind of figured out enough of the kinks and the engineering of the systems we were using to do this, it seemed like the next step was application, which is where we started to collaborate with a lot of different groups, whether they were at MIT or Harvard. We had groups in Germany we were working with. It was kind of spreading all over the place. And it had gotten to a point where we were spending most of our time essentially playing customer support to all of our collaborators and not getting to do any of the things we cared about. And at that point, I had an army of undergrads that were helping with this, and we were all just busy helping others move, that we started to think, okay, maybe we should just start a company around it. And like I was saying, that I initially wasn't convinced about switching to the industry side. I was like, well, we could start a company that just deals with this, that just sells these systems to people, helps do the support, et cetera. And I'll go do a postdoc to kind of go through further immune engineering concepts that we were interested in. So anyway, that was kind of the beginning of getting Squeeze going, is this sense that, okay, there's a lot of pull to do this, so we might as well start something. And of course, I severely underestimated how hard it is to actually get something going, but we're like, we can do this. So that's how Squeeze got going, was just based off this pull from people wanting it. And the idea was that it would initially start selling the systems to these different partners.
So let's do a little bit of the timeline here, because basically it's your PhD research. You see the unmet need that you basically at some point you're just like, as you said, like, let's do a company out of this because we have so much demand for what we're doing. But you also mentioned that you had some second thoughts if you want to do this like entrepreneurship full time. So that led you to your postdoc position. So can you walk us through the timeline, how long it took you to,
Yeah, so I started my PhD in 2008. By 2010 is when we had kind of discovered this and started to move on it. And then in 2013 is when we started Squeeze and we had our first big papers come out and everything. So around that time, I was still, let's say, drinking the Kool-Aid of, if you're really smart and good at what you do, you stay academic, you become a professor, because we, the smart people, come up with the new therapies and the new technologies, and then some idiot can go translate it. Any monkey could do that. So we thought we had done the hard part and the monkeys could do the rest, in the sense of, this thing works, people are using it, let's just spin it out. And so that was and of course, taking a few business school classes for fun, they make it sound like all rainbows and unicorns to do entrepreneurship. I'm like, yeah, how hard can this be? We'll just be like sipping drinks and VCs will throw money at us and customers will come banging our door down. Like, anyone could do this. So that's how we got it going in 2013. I was very involved, but technically I didn't join the company. I went and did a postdoc in immunology at Harvard in parallel because we were starting to, so undergrad and grad school were all technically chemical engineering, even though my PhD had started to become very biology heavy. So I did an immunology postdoc because engineering immune cells was kind of the frontier we were particularly excited about, because if you can engineer the immune system, there's a lot of things you can do in cancer as well as autoimmune disease. So I was trying to do the immunology stuff in my postdoc in parallel to the company stuff. And I was realizing more and more, oh, this kind of translation stuff is not easy as far as getting things out there in the world. There were all kinds of problems we were dealing with on that side. And I was realizing on the academic side, there's really a ceiling to what you can do without breaking out, just because of the way the academic world is set up. It's extremely hard to say, do a trial on this new thing or get enough funding to get these things going. And so that's what made me start to question whether or not I would want to stay on that track. And it took about a year and a half of Squeeze existing, plus me being in kind of the postdoc realm, for me to finally make the leap to the other side. And really I think a good example of the conversation was I was talking to both of my PhD professors, Klaus Jensen and Bob Langer, and Bob had a good way of putting it where he said, if you think this is the biggest thing you'll ever do, you should jump. If you don't think it's the biggest thing you'll do, then you should stay academic. You'll come up with other things, and then you could jump on those, or you can just keep staying academic. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to jump on this. Like this, to me, engineering cells is going to be huge. It's now or never. So that's what made me eventually jump, even though I was pretty 50-50 in my head. In retrospect, I'm super glad I did. And the way I would ultimately describe the kind of how one should probably think about the balance of the decision is, the nice thing with academia is I'm picking on the problem that there's a ceiling to what you can do, but there's also a floor. If a project fails, it's normal. You just move on to the next one. That's just how it works. In the entrepreneurship side, yes, there's no real ceiling. Like if you make this work, you can go to the moon. But if it fails, it crashes and burns. It's a very painful thing. There is no floor to these things. Like it dies. So you need to be okay with that scariness of what the upside downside could swing a lot wider on the entrepreneurship side, which I think I do okay with. But I think for a lot of people, that's a shock to the system when they go to that side. But yeah, that's why I jumped, and then we switched Squeeze's direction towards therapeutics, which we can get into. But there was a lot of push-pull on kind of platform versus therapeutic, and there was a good number of forces pushing towards the therapeutic side. So that's where we started to go down the path of creating our own therapies.
Yeah, that's something that I want to jump in a bit. But before we jump there, let's talk about, like you say, that it's daunting entering this path of entrepreneurship, and like basically it's high risk, high reward, but you can also fall very hard. But on the other side, that you have another environment. So like in scientific world, you have this hierarchy, and basically you are a PhD, you have some standing, and so basically you just go through the ranks. But when you become a founder, especially the younger age, and also you talked about this in other interviews, that the space is dominated by experienced executives. So how did you convince those people who have been there for like so long to give you money, to support you, and so like to take you seriously?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think biotech especially seems a lot harder than tech because it is more, let's call it, conservative in its mindsets. Unless you're an old pharma guy in a suit, people are very skeptical. So I think in our case, it was a mix of things. So very early on so the first money Squeeze got was $100K, which was collectively from my two professors and my parents, because my parents had saved $30K for my first mortgage. And I was like, I would like to waste it on this, please. And they were like, okay. So, we just started to get things going. And then the next batch of money was angel investors. And angel investors, one of my old board members had a good way of putting it. You got to see if you can pass the cocktail party test, meaning if they are at a cocktail party talking to their other rich friends, is this company they just invested in a fun story? to tell. So is the technology cool? And a lot of times with the angels, there's this dimension that you see of, do they see a little bit of themselves in you? So one of the biggest checks we ever got was actually this guy that had gone to one or two meetings and then decided he wanted to give us 250K, which we were super, or 200, 250, like we were super appreciative of. And he later on told us like, yeah, you and your friend Augustine, who helped get Squeeze going, you guys reminded me of me and my partner back when we were coming out of MIT, who got our business going. And I was like, yeah, I just want to get these guys going. So little things like that help get you going. And eventually for, let's say, the VCs and others, what gets their attention is, oh, these guys don't die, or they keep getting things moving. Like we saw them, whatever, 2 years ago, and we're like, they're going to be dead in 6 months. But somehow these cockroaches keep going. And they keep gaining momentum from other places. So these kinds of things are what they pay attention to and starts convincing them there might be a there to do this.
Okay, so let's switch to Squeeze. And you already mentioned that in the beginning, you had some strategic shifts from platform technology to drug development company. So can you tell us a little bit more about, you mentioned already there were some heated discussions around it. So just a little bit insight of how the decision was made and if you thought it would be a good idea yourself, or were you more convinced to do it?
Yeah. So on the platform versus therapeutic side, which is, I think, a debate many people face in this zone, we started off with the platform side of it, where the idea was, okay, we have a technology that can enable a lot of things. Let's just get out there and start working with a bunch of people. And we had good interest because of the novel things we can do. But the typical problem we would run into is when it came to clinical translation, cell therapies were new and people found our technology really interesting. But on the other hand, they're like, oh, I love this, I want to use it, but call me when someone else goes to clinic with it, then I'll be number two. And it's like, well, maybe you could be number one. And they're like, no, let's not get crazy. So there's this big chicken and egg problem oftentimes with platforms, and it manifests in different ways. In our case, it would manifest as this clinical chicken and egg problem where they were excited about it, but no one wanted to take a chance on it. They didn't want to be the first. And so you needed to find a way to somehow get there. And that was one frustration that was emerging with the platform side. The other frustration was, with Squeeze, you could do a lot of new things. There was a lot of cell types we could deal with that weren't possible. There's a lot of cargoes we could deal with that weren't possible. However, when you would go talk to people, I would say 90% of our early customers were doing things they could already do. They just wanted to do it a little bit better, like 10% better delivery or cheaper or whatever. And only 10% of these people were doing the really new cool things. And in our mindset, it was, we think we're in a world of cars and we finally invented an airplane, but people are just buying the airplane to drive it on the freeway really fast instead of flying it. And we're like, yeah, go fly. And so these frustrations of the chicken and egg problem of clinical translation and people using it for things that they could already do versus the new things collectively was, for example, for me, really convincing me that I guess we just got to go do the therapeutic ourselves. Like that wasn't the original plan, but I had become a proponent, and some of our potential investors and board members were also intrigued by that. But I had started to become a proponent of let's just freaking do it ourselves. And the thing that helped cement that in the end was that we were having parallel discussions with Roche and Pfizer, and Roche in particular was very interested in one of the new things we could do. And so that validation was very encouraging to the investor side as well. And eventually in 2015, we did our first big deal with Roche. And that is what, to your earlier question of how did we convince people to give us money, a lot of people got whiplash with that first deal with Roche. They're like, oh, but Roche, the big conservative, smart Swiss company, gave these children money with their little cartoons. Like maybe they are onto something. So that kind of thing helped a ton with the validation, and that more or less cemented, all right, we're on a therapeutic path now because we have a kind of big brother entity also supporting this and excited about it.
Yeah, that's I mean, a lot of founders are also faced with this decision. Oh, what do I want to have a platform company, or do I go into a single asset therapeutic company? So, very important decision that can seal the fate of your company. And it seems for the time being, you did the right decision. You were doing well, as you said. You managed to survive.
Yeah.
You managed to attract a lot of people, a lot of investors. You managed to attract Roche to have a deal with them. So perfect conditions. Let's go further in the timeline. So 2020, you
Yeah.
went public, but by 2023, you like things go in another direction. You laid
Yeah.
off like 80% of your staff. So at what point did you realize that something went wrong? Were there any early warning signs for it? And did you try to do, like, of course you tried to, kind of to do something against it, but any specific steps that you tried to keep the company going?
Yeah. So I would say at any of these given stages from, what I described in 2015 with the first Roche deal through 2020, there was always all kinds of crazy ups and downs, and we would somehow pull through, and the motivation was therapeutic. So we went public in 2020 because we had finally gone into the clinic. The markets were pretty favorable for trying to do this, and we had gotten to a scale now that you kind of had to go public, in the sense that the amount of money you're burning on an annual basis is something that's very hard for the private side to continue to support. You just kind of had to go, in my view, you just kind of had to go public at that point. So we went public in 2020 when biotech was also still hot, and we raised more money once we were public. So we got 80 million at the IPO, another 60 in the secondary that we did. And so we had our 3 clinical trials going. And now in early-ish 21, the stock markets start to weaken and start to go sideways because biotech starts to go downwards. And the big question that started to really push in 2022, because we had quite a bit of money already, like 2021, we were like, oh, this is temporary. We'll weather the storm. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. And then in 2022, the financial market side of the problem was not going away. And so it had gotten to the point of, I think everyone would agree, we had to do something. And the question was, what do you do? At that point, we were 150 people. We had 3 clinical trials. And this is where kind of the divergent philosophies would emerge. Now, the typical playbook for a public biotech in a situation like that says, you focus everything on the lead asset, you burn down everything else, and you maximize your runway to hope you finally get that clinical results that makes it a win. And if you don't, this was the path, it dies, it's normal, right? It's let's call it respectable failure. That was the path that a majority of people, not everyone, but a majority of people on the board side wanted to do. I had the more weird push of, okay, this is an existential crisis of platform versus therapeutic. Would I bet everything on that one program? Will I let the broader potential of what we could do live or die by this one thing? And the program we were pursuing is a mechanism you would call a cancer vaccine. So it was a cell therapy for oncology. Cancer vaccine mechanisms are notoriously high risk, high reward. No one has really ever pulled it off, but if you can, it is massively transformative. And we in Roche understood that that's what we were doing. Like, we're taking this high risk, high reward shot, but the platform could do a lot of things. So gun to my head, I didn't want to bet everything on the one program. And the thing I was pushing for was, let's open up the technology side. Over all these years, there's been many people that have been interested in what we can do. We've been clinical now. Like, that chicken and egg problem is gone, the one that I had mentioned. And over the years, a lot of people were interested in using us, but we had been very difficult about it because it was basically, unless you did a Roche-like deal, which at that point Roche had given us over 100 million in cash, we weren't going to do it. We weren't going to do the deal. But I was saying, let's make it simple. Let's open it up. So in that debate, people were feeling conservative about doing what the typical playbook would be, which is bet on the lead program, don't do the weird idea I had. And I would say some of the dynamics, as objective as I can be, was probably, let's put yourself in an independent board member's shoes. If you did the classical thing, if it worked out, great. If it didn't work out, respectable failure happens all the time. You were responsible. If you did the crazy thing I was saying, even if you thought it made logical sense, if it didn't work, you would look like kind of the irresponsible adult that didn't pull the child out of the driver's seat before they drove it off a cliff. If it did work, there is no way in hell it was your idea. And so it was kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, from a pure kind of personal perspective, I would argue, for people like that. So I kind of understand why they would go that way, even if I would argue a number of them logically agreed with what I was saying. It was just a weird thing to do. So anyway, that was the divergence. And to your point of like trying to save it, et cetera, we were having a lot of debates about these things. I was pushing really hard for what I thought would be the best plan. It did kind of come down to a point where, okay, if I keep sticking my neck out, they might just chop it off now. But me being me, I couldn't help myself because I'm like, nope, I just think it's a terrible idea to focus everything on the lead program. Like, I don't think we should do that. So it kind of came down to well, if he's not going to do it and we, the board, want to go this way, then he needs to be out. So that's kind of what led to it. And I think and we can get into the aftermath, but the immediate aftermath of it, which was somewhat surprising both to me and to them, because an interesting part of the dynamics is that most of or everyone except one person on the board were independents. None of them, so basically none except one of them were even investors. So they were doing what they thought the investors would want. Turned out, once they announced it, like stock crashed, whatever it was, 70% or something, the investors hated that plan. And I thought the investors would like my plan more. Being public, you can't, it's not easy to kind of get feedback on a specific plan like that. There's a lot of complexities to whether or not you can talk to them about this. But I thought a number of the investors would be on my side. I didn't expect it to be that dramatic, where they freaked out at them. And Roche also got really mad because Roche always cared about the platform side, and they knew that lead program was high risk, high reward. But by burning down the platform and getting rid of everyone involved with it, it kind of ruined the thing.
So what was it the time that Roche walked away from the deal that you...
So they walked away very quickly after that. They announced all the changes, whatever it was, November 30th or December 1st of 22. And Roche was officially out by like 5 months later or something, which by their standards is instantaneous. They move slowly. Yeah, so that was something that kind of was, I think people read the room wrong in a way. I mean, you're only hearing one side of the story, but I'm trying to be objective. I think the classical thing is to focus on the lead program. I will say, in fairness, a lot of times with drug discovery platforms, let's call it, people don't actually have the option I was describing of like, let's just sell the technology. It's not trivial to do that in most cases. In our case, I would argue like it's a piece of equipment with consumables. You can actually do this. But in most cases, it's not trivial to do that, or there's no obvious way to do that, to monetize their platform.
So what did you do, or like what were your thoughts? Were you basically you told the board that the right direction to go is to stick with the platform, which they didn't, and it turned out to be a very bad decision. So what were your thoughts back then? Like, I can imagine some, kind of just personal, like everyone has emotions, like some emotional side of it. And also, when was the time for you to realize it's time to let go, even though you knew, it seems like you knew that the right direction was not the one that the board was going for?
Yeah. So I guess maybe I'll answer it in reverse on the let go part. I guess in a weird way, you could argue I never really let go. I just got shot over it. So it was kind of a, will I just keep going? And then if they shoot me, they shoot me. If they don't shoot me, we're doing what we're doing. Uh, yeah, I think that came, I don't know, probably a few months before they actually shot me when I was like, you know what, I think it's a terrible idea to do the single asset play. We're just gonna keep pushing for this side. And if they shoot me, they shoot me. Admittedly, I gave it a less than 50% chance they would actually shoot me, mostly because part of me was like, it would send such a terrible signal to do that. And who's going to replace me? Not because I'm irreplaceable, but this is a negative situation. No one good wants to jump on a burning ship, especially if you just shot the captain and set the ship on fire. So, like, no good new captain is coming on board. So it was one of those situations where, like, yes, there were things in the past where if you got rid of the young, spicy founder and put an adult in there instead, people would have been like, oh, bravo, like they've graduated. But this was a different case. It was like, oh, you're already in trouble and you're setting it on fire and shooting him. Like, who's going to come into this? So I didn't think it was likely they would do that, but I thought there was a good chance they would. So anyway, I think just made up my mind and I'm like, let's see what happens. I can't stay with a plan that I think is terrible. So I'll keep trying to save the ship, and if they shoot me, then it's their fault from then on. So that was the determination part. And then the kind of, yeah, emotional reaction stuff. Obviously, I was super sad because to me, or like one way I would describe the startup stuff is like, I have 3 kids. So I'm like, I'm Squeeze's mom, but I'm my other kids' dad, and Squeeze is my first kid. So in that way, I was obviously super attached to the whole thing. So I was really sad when they did what they did. And what kind of, in a way, led to Portal is after I was out. So after I was out, or sorry, for many years, even at Squeeze, I would have said I would never, ever do a startup again. Even though it was going well for most of it and all that, I'd be like, it's just too painful. If Squeeze disappeared tomorrow, I am not doing a startup. I'll go to Big Pharma or something, but I am not doing this again. But then once what happened, and I saw the stock crash and I knew what Roche's reaction was and all those things, I was like, oh, they're going to die. And even though I was trying to look at other things, my head just kept flipping back to the kind of original goal of if you can engineer cells, you can do all kinds of things. And letting the whole concept die was something that apparently I couldn't be okay with. So the more I realized it's probably an irreversible decline, I was like, well, I guess we got to go do something about it. And so that's what kind of led to the Portal side, where we had thoughts on what a next gen version could look like. And obviously we knew we knew the ecosystem and the technology stuff quite well. And from a education on therapeutics versus platform, I was like, well, we'll just go the platform route. Squeeze hasn't tried to do tools in like whatever it was, 8 years at that point, but we're pretty sure we would know how to do it. So let's just go do that.
So essentially, if I understand correctly, the founding of Portal and, kind of moving on for another, like to another company is basically something like your unfinished business and you still believing in the technology that you're saying, okay, like I still have to do it. I still have to make sure it succeeds now with another company.
Yeah, most people would say I'm really not good at giving up on anything, and this would be a good example. And I try to be self-aware. So when we were getting these things going, I'm like, well, in retrospect, either this would have been brilliant persistence, or I should have just let go, and it was stupid to kind of keep going again. But I'm like, there's only one way to find out. So here we go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how did you convince investors and also people to join your company after what happened?
Yeah, so it's interesting. has a lot of advantages and some disadvantages. So I would say the people that knew me and or the squeeze situation well were super supportive. And actually the way Portal got going is some execs in the field and Squeeze's own hedge funds gave us money to get going. So people that knew us best were the ones that gave money because they're like, yeah, we still think this thing is cool and we think what happened was stupid. Please, let's see what you can do. Because even Roche took us in, even though it was complicated for them to do so. Because it was basically back to back. They announced they broke up with Squeeze, and then they announced that we joined their incubator. So even they took sides essentially in the matter. So I would say the people that were willing to support were the people that knew us best. And as far as team members coming in, we rehired some former Squeeze people that got involved, but then others were new. And I think the way people will look at the kind of history of the Squeeze thing, let's say when it's immediately post all those incidents, if they know you really well, then they'll have their own, let's call it, valid judgment of the situation. If they don't know you really well, they'll be like, okay, they did what's relatively uncommon, which is went from like PhD to IPO and stuff. So that's points in favor, but then it exploded. And was it his fault it exploded? Was it other people's faults? I mean, being founder CEO, to an extent, it is on you too, but like they don't know how to deconvolute that explosion. And so average conservatism would say, stay away. Other people's logic is like, oh no, these people that got that far the first time and learned a lot of hard lessons, there's like nothing better because they know exactly what they're getting themselves into and they're way better at it the second time. So others like that. So anyway, it cuts both ways.
Yeah. So like, as you said, so people know you, people know what you can do, your qualifications, and it's the best attribute you have, that you have good reputation. So it's overall a very crazy story. And the one that you seem to, learn your lesson and basically made the best out of it. But let's go back to 2015 to add some more craziness. Can you just tell us what was happening with you in that time?
Yeah. And actually the other thing I'll add to the prior thing on the kind of investor side of it is that one thing that also changes with this kind of history is I would say for a lot of young founders, a lot of investors can take the mindset of, oh, they can, they'll listen to us, they'll do our bidding. So we, the board / investors, will functionally control the strategy and direction of the company. I think when you have a history like mine, for better and for worse, you've made it clear. Like, if you sign up to this, he'll die on his hill. So don't think you're going to come in and like make him be your puppet. And some investors like that. Like they want people that are just going to do whatever they think is best and they're along for the ride. And there's others that think they know best and want to control it. And, who knows what reality is, but that's a bisection of it. But yes, back to the 2015 question. So in parallel to all of the switching to being a company CEO and the Roche stuff going on and our Series A and me getting married, I found out in October that year that I had gotten DLBCL, which is a kind of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So there was a insane irony to me working on a B-cell engineering deal with Roche while I had a B-cell cancer trying to kill me. And so it was definitely very interesting to go through that. So I went through the typical 6 chemo cycles people go through for first line. Luckily, kind of all clear. After that, it's whatever it is, 4 or 5 months of pain and suffering, but then you're good on the other side. But I think those kinds of things also helped give a lot of perspective early on because you get to see what the patient side is like. Like in theory, a lot of us like the idea of treating these diseases and some people have a connection to it, some people don't. In my case, I didn't have a connection to it. It was just like conceptually seemed like a good thing to do, but then you get to actually see what it's like on the other side. So it gives a lot of perspective on kind of what you're trying to solve for, what the people around it think, what they're going through, how the doctors view this, how the nurses view it, the patients and their families. So that stuff was all really interesting and added perspective. And I think inevitably with a diagnosis like that, everyone goes through their like little mini existential crisis of what am I doing? Am I doing what I should be, et cetera. And I think, I don't know, maybe a huge benefit of going through that, what was I, like 27? Uh, when I was 27 is that I'm like, oh, yeah, I am doing what I want to be doing. And so I didn't lose a step on the work side. It was, I don't know, I would get chemo on Fridays. So I would be sick on the weekend, but still back at it on Monday. And I was on my laptop during chemo. So there were quite a few emails and other things that went out during that. But my mindset was like, yeah, I'm doing what I want to be doing. And even if this thing does take me down, I'll go down swinging was my mindset. I mean, obviously, luckily it worked out, but I think that clarity probably helped early on because it gave you even a richer sense of why you're doing this.
Yeah, so first of all, we are glad that you are well, that everything went well, and enormous respect for you doing all of this because it's chemo is not fun, as you said, and doing some work while you're getting the chemo, it's amazing. So,
what else was I going to do?
Oh no, eat some chips and kind of.
It was like a mix of watching Game of Thrones if I really wasn't feeling well, or doing working.
So you also mentioned that you got the perspective of the patient, which is super rare. So what would you say that some misconceptions that early stage founders have? Like some do have some exposure, like as from medical side, from doctor side, but these are different, kind of biotechs. They have one aim, but when you ask the patient, maybe it's not even the survival benefit they're looking for, but more the quality of their life while having these therapies. So what would be the lesson that you learned and that you would want our listeners or founders to learn?
So it was exactly that. I think it's when you're doing this for the right reasons, but you haven't actually seen it or been through it, I think you severely underestimate the importance of safety and toxicity to what the kind of real world implementation of your drugs is going to be. Because a lot of even investors or founders and some doctors and scientists, et cetera, when they're talking about, let's say, a cancer therapy, all they're looking at is the response rate or the overall survival, et cetera. And they don't appreciate that toxicity matters a ton to patients and by extension the doctors, because even if something was going to give them, I don't know, 3 extra months survival, if it's a shitty life, they don't want it. They're not going to do it. And so it further highlights that if you can create things that stay relatively safe while addressing the disease, they have an exponentially higher probability of being a massive clinical and commercial success. I think it's the kind of thing that, to their credit, pharma, commercial, or late stage people understand, because they really think about kind of lines of therapy and combos, and they are well aware of the pros and cons of these kind of confounding toxicity issues if you're adding one toxic drug to another, et cetera. So I think safety ultimately is something that people really underappreciate what it means for the ultimate like clinical and commercial impact case. You appreciate it much later on, but early on, it's really not obvious to people.
Yeah, those are very good and very crucial insights. So having been in those shoes and also having those different perspectives, what would you say needs to change for the broader biotech world to actually, kind of understand this and also implement this or make it better?
I think it's hard. Unfortunately, I think it's a little hard to do much about it, but I'm trying to think what changes. So the reason it's a little hard to do too much about it is because you're so distant from that phase. Like vast majority of biotechs, even if they're successful, they get taken out long before they're commercial. So they never have the direct feedback loop of this mattered or it didn't matter in that way. But I think one of the most impactful things would be to really keep pushing on this kind of quality-based pricing. So a system that really values the quality of life as well as the years that you gained or the months that you gained and provides the pricing premium for that. Because then there would be a much clearer numerical advantage for the biotechs and their investors, et cetera, to consider making a drug that people would actually use and have a better quality of life in addition to the years that come out of it. Because these highly toxic drugs that might give you a month or two, like people don't want them necessarily. And they're never going to be first line. That's another thing. Like being first line matters a ton commercially. So I think, yeah, a better pricing system that's more quality based. I think that helps a lot. I think other things that can really help the system, even though this might be controversial to say, is I'm in favor of something that's a little more single payer like, that is based on outcomes, just because I think there's too many incentives for Me Too drugs, because so much development money and time and biotech time and money goes into Me Too drugs. Like when we were moving up with things with Squeeze, the big trend was IO, and people spent a ton of time and money on it, but still Keytruda is king. And that's been around for a long time. And I think similarly right now with all the obesity stuff, the GLP-1s, et cetera, I'm like, how many of these do you need? I'm all for better versions, but there's so many Me Too versions that come out. And the problem is the US commercial system makes it rewarding to do so because it's competitive in the market. And I would argue not in a good way in this context. So we could go off on that topic a lot, but aligning those incentives better where true impacts gets an outsized reward, I think will kind of trickle down and improve the biotech incentives too. But until something there changes, it's kind of hard for them to behave any differently.
Yeah, those are very important insights. And you mentioned we can go down this rabbit hole for, I think, a long time, but I would actually want to focus back on Portal.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit of what's new, what's different, and what's the competitive edge?
Yeah. So the kind of fundamental advantages that we think relate to doing mechanical delivery, whether it was Squeeze or now what we do with Portal, is that you can deliver virtually anything into any cell type while keeping them normal. And it, without boring you guys too much with the science side of it, it kind of comes down to the fact that a lot of current techniques like electroporation, where you electrocute a cell, or nanoparticles, they're very dependent on the material you're trying to deliver and the cell type you're trying to go into. And because no one likes getting electrocuted, it often causes dysfunction. In our case, because it's purely a mechanical disruption of the outer membrane, like you're not electrocuting the whole thing, you're just disrupting the outside. It's a much simpler mechanism, and that's why it works across cell types, and that's why it works easily across cargoes, while otherwise not traumatizing the cell too much. So these have been kind of the fundamental advantages with mechanical delivery, and with Squeeze, we were trying to do new things based on it. And with Portal's new generation, it kind of continues that. The main delta between what we used to do on the Squeeze side versus the Portal side is we were able to simplify the technology even further to allow it to get incorporated into all kinds of systems, which would have previously been difficult. So what I mean there is with Squeeze, it was a silicon microfluidic chip. And when you get into microfluidics, you often need pretty high pressures, or for what we were doing, you needed pretty high pressure. So you needed 10 bars of pressure to drive this through. To give you a sense of 10 bars, it's like, I don't know, 3 times the tire pressure in your car. It's pretty high. And so it's something that standard equipment can't really do. On the other hand, for Portal, we boiled this down to what essentially looks like a fancy filter. So it's a thin piece of silicon with holes in it. There are no microfluidics. And while it builds on the same concept of mechanically deforming a cell to deliver, it requires far less pressure. So it's under 1 bar of pressure, meaning that you pushing on a syringe is enough. And now you're well within the range of what most equipment can do. And so a lot of our goal with Portal is to be kind of an Intel inside to a lot of other systems, like just integrate into other machines that exist and enable them to do all these new things that would be the path of least resistance to adoption and could kind of maximally amplify the types of applications you can do, which is a big part of why I think we've had so much traction, where we already have over 50 partners, including 9 of the big pharma. It's because not only do we enable all these new things, but we're also super easy to deal with and integrate with larger scale equipment.
So let's put on this entrepreneurial hat that you mentioned. So not just a cool technology and a lot of stuff that you can work on, but like asking the question, what is the use case? So like, where does it help? And you mentioned you have already like over 50 partners right now. So what do early adopters say? Where do they use them? And where do you essentially see this technology go, and which avenues can it open?
Yeah, so I would say, kind of starting from the long term of it, my biggest thing, and obviously some of our partners' biggest motivation for this, is that I really think you can have a future where cell therapies are generated at the bedside. And the idea is if you have a simple platform that can deliver whatever you want into whatever cell type, now you can engineer them to do virtually anything. And you really open up the doors of what kinds of cell therapies are possible. And doing it at the point of care will maximize that accessibility. And that's kind of a beautiful future if we can enable it. And we want to be the Intel inside that made it happen for all these different machines that you can have in the future. So that's one of the big, or the biggest driver, I would say, for the long run. And in a weird way, maybe the kind of historical parallel I would argue is relevant is if you think about biologics. What led to this ubiquity of biologics these days was not that at some point in the 70s and 80s, people thought it was a good idea to inject proteins. They had been trying to do that forever. It was the invention of recombinant DNA that suddenly made it really easy to make whatever protein you wanted and do it at scale. And that's what underpinned Genentech and Amgen and all the rest that came after. And I would say cell therapy is in a similar spot where the current stuff people do, while still groundbreaking, is kind of the Stone Age version of what's possible. And if you can make it have that recombinant DNA moment where you suddenly made it really easy to make whatever you want and scale it out by making it accessible at the point of care, that's what can really unleash the potential of cell therapies. So that's the big, big long-term goal, and some of our partnerships are oriented around that. In the nearer term, aside from people making cells do all kinds of tricks they couldn't do before, the other side that's really taken off for us and is kind of new, but we've been interested, or new to me, but interesting to learn, is drug screening. Because we can deliver all kinds of things into cells, one area that's been particularly exciting for people is that we can deliver a lot of impermeable small molecules or peptides. And a lot of the newer generation small molecule and peptide drugs people work on, they tend to be large by conventional standards, meaning that most of what they initially discover is impermeable. So they need to do a lot of chemistry on them to make them permeable, only to then find out the thing was never going to work. So what we help them do is we take those impermeable versions they find, they use us to deliver them, see what would have actually worked, and then go do chemistry on that to make it more drug-like. And this is a side that's a big part of why we have so many pharma partners, is because they just use us for screening, and we enable all kinds of new biological insights for them to make better and better small molecule and peptide drugs.
That's amazing. So what is the long-term goal? Do you want to stay platform technology and enable other players for more effective drug discovery or their experiments, to say it broadly? Or do you still want to go to the path of you making therapeutics?
So we've basically sworn off making therapeutics as part of Portal. And it's a lot of, maybe it's an overcorrection based on the lessons from Squeeze. But when we were doing Squeeze, many people were telling me it's impossible to be both platform and therapeutic at the same time, and I didn't believe them. But seeing how the forces and the incentives work, I'm pretty convinced it's nearly impossible to be both. And I say that because the second you have an IND cleared, now it's going to be all about what's your patient data and how is that trial going. And it's because I would think of it as we at Squeeze, I don't know, at our peak, I think we were spending like 70, 80 million a year. Uh, if you have a clinical trial running that's costing you 70, 80 million a year, if it hits, some big pharma is buying you for, let's say, 2 billion. If it hits and you have a platform behind it, maybe they'll pay you 2.1. If it hits and you don't have any platform, it's still, I don't know, 1.9. On the other hand, if it flops, you were spending 80 million a year. So even if you have a platform business that's whatever, making 10 million a year, which is on a good trajectory to get going, it's never going to make up for how much you spent on the therapeutics, and it's still going to kill you. So I think understandably for investors and others, it's just hard to value those things simultaneously. Your valuation just gets dominated by your trial. And that's what I think makes it extremely hard to be both. So kind of going back to the question on the portal side, we're pretty committed to just doing the platform side because I'd much rather we be a small economic participant in like thousands of new drugs getting out there than the full economic participant in like one or two things getting out there. And it just goes back to like, I really believe we can enable many, many, many things. So let's just go do that. If I thought we could only enable one or two things, I'd be like, yeah, we should go therapeutic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and also goes in the same direction of your mission of helping as many patients as possible and enabling other companies to do that. Then you have 100x, much importance and I forgot the word.
Yeah, much bigger impact.
Impact, yes, that's what the word I was looking for. So anything else that, I mean, again, going on this motive of you starting the company, it failing, you learned your lessons, you try to do it better this time, or like you're doing this better this time. Anything else beyond not going into therapeutics that you learned and implementing with Portal right now?
For what it's worth, I would say for some things you should go therapeutic. For what we do, I wouldn't. I think other lessons, maybe one of the other kind of most important things, which is a cliche you hear all the time, is that the people part really matters. And I think maybe the way I would specify it further from what a lot of people would say is that it really matters who's willing to take a chance on you that doesn't have to. Like people that are whatever, powerful enough, important enough, whatever it is, that they have no real reason to reach down and help you out, but they do, because I think they're the ones that make the biggest difference, or they're the ones that were critical to getting anywhere. So I would say the equivalents in our cases would have been like some of the notable ones were, say, our first Series A investor at Polaris was Amy Schulman. She had just come out of Pfizer, was a partner at Polaris. She had plenty of options of what she could have placed her bets on, but she really liked us and what we were doing. And so she put a bet on us when a lot of others would have just seen like a group of children with their cartoons. Another huge one was our main big champion at Roche, Christian Rummel, who was head of oncology discovery at the time. Now he's head of R&D at Bayer. He was similar. Like he had many, many other things he could have looked at or could have done, but we just fascinated him because like the concept of Squeeze was crazy and simple. The types of cell engineering we were doing were, on the one hand, very adventurous, on the other hand, made total sense. So someone like him taking a chance too. And then there were other kind of investors along the way or partners or individuals along the way. But these kinds of things, I think, are what make all the difference in the end. So I would say that's super important. Like people that are good and take a chance on you, you really owe them. And they're the ones that make the huge differences over time. The other thing I would say is this is more speaking to me, maybe, is I think it's very tempting to bet on, or as your company grows, I think it's very tempting to bring people in that you feel like, or in your heart, you feel like this person's mediocre, but they check a lot of boxes, or they make my board happy because they look a certain way, etc. But you're like, they're never going to be great. I would say don't do that. On the other hand, some of the best people we ever had were the ones that were relatively early in their career, were really good, and we just kept giving them, or we just kept taking the chance on them for the next level. Like you could have easily brought in someone above them, but you're like, you know what? They're really good. Let's just let them do it and hope they pull it off or give them the support they need to pull it off. So long story short, betting on potential and like high performance over box checking, I would say really matters. Obviously, if someone checks the boxes and is really good, excellent. But those people are unicorns. There really aren't that many of them. And if they're there, they probably have better things to do, or it's really hard to convince them to come to you. So when you can get them, you're super lucky, but don't count on it. Yeah, those are probably the main things I can think of.
Yeah, so what you said, basically betting on talent and giving the people the chance to actually show their talent and potential is super important one, especially right now in the like biotech field isn't the great one to be in. A lot of layoffs and a lot of, young graduates who are hungry, who want to make the difference, but they constrained by those boxes of 2 years of experience somewhere or something like, kind of something that might not be looking good on the paper, but they can make up for it. And as you said, like the people aspect is what matters most. And I would say you can learn a lot of stuff if you're really motivated and if you really want to do it.
Yeah, and I think people underappreciate the utility of having good advisors that you link up with your top talent because most of these really talented, high potential people, they can do well with really good advisors because people that you could have never hired but really have a lot of experience and are good are more than happy to help mentor someone, whatever, 20, 30 years earlier on, just because they're like, yeah, I think they're good. I need to kind of give back to the community, let's call it, because someone took chances on me back in the day. And so they can be very helpful. And I think that's the best of both worlds because now you have the benefit of top tier experience you could have never hired, in addition to kind of the talent and fire that the earlier people have. And one interesting thing you, or at least we would see, which is a little counterintuitive, but you need to watch out for, is oftentimes the talented people that you have taken a chance on, they themselves have trouble hiring talented people under them because they have a little bit of imposter syndrome. So they want people under them that check boxes. And you need to help them resist that. Be like, I know you're scared, but don't do to others what we're not doing to you. So you also got to keep trying to nurture good people under you as opposed to like bring in someone who you know is but they check a lot of boxes and will make you feel less afraid of the position you're in.
Yeah, that's a very, very important insight. To close off, we want to show that the founders are human as well. Even though you had chemo and you were doing work emails. So, kind of for the closing question, how do you maintain work-life balance? Is there work-life balance in being a founder? And what are your strategy to maximize both sides of your life?
There's definitely no work-life balance being a founder, or I don't know. It'll be interesting to see who pulls it off. But I think for the more human sides, I mean, I guess everyone has things they like outside of work or things they need to do outside of work to just kind of decompress. Otherwise, they jump off a cliff. I think in my case, obviously, love the family and kid stuff. My wife has been super supportive and tolerant of everything over the years, and our kids are crazy and super cute. So aside from trying to spend some time with them, I think for me, I'm kind of basic. So I still love playing soccer. So I would generally try to do that, even though I'm getting a little old for it and keep injuring myself. And then the other side is I'm still childish and I like going clubbing because I love EDM. So I will still go do that, especially if there's a good DJ that I like in town. Because especially stuff like the soccer and the going out, I think are when my work brain will more or less shut off because I'm distracted with everything else going on. So I think those are kind of like the forced breaks because otherwise I wake up and I think about work, and the last thing I do before I go to sleep is I'm thinking about work or sending an email or writing a note or something.
Yeah, you cannot think about work when you're chasing a ball or dancing.
Yeah,
So
exactly. If there's laser lights in your eyes or you're chasing a ball, it's a little hard to think of work.
thank you very much for your time. It was an amazing conversation. Thank you very much for being on the podcast, sharing your story with us, and hope our listeners have a lot of to learn from it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Nucleate Podcast. Be sure to subscribe if you'd like to keep up with future episodes. See you next time.